right, we are live. Okay, so lids are on here. Go on from the dry out. We are picking up with Pesachim in chapter 4, and to understand this, we're going to have to understand a little bit about what happens on a regular Yom Tov evening or a Shabbat evening. So you're a workman, and it's Friday. What do you do?
Leave early.
Leave early, exactly right. So, we need to stop work early in order to prepare for Shabbat. And usually we stop around Mincha time, right? Everyone's understanding this, right? Pesachim, there's a different requirement, right? For Pesach, we stop at midday, at noon. And so that's built in. And the question, of course, would be why. And that was when, sorry, got a little stuff in here. That was when the korban, when the sacrifice was brought. And the idea being, so you bring a sacrifice to the temple, and then you take it home, and you go back to work? No, once the sacrifice is done, you are in Pesach mode, and you shouldn't be going back to work. Make sense?
What's the word you're saying?
Pesachim, Pesach. So Pesachim is the technical term, the title of the section of Mishnah that deals with Pesach, the holiday of Passover.
Oh, you're saying that.
Yeah.
Yep. That one, exactly. You getting extra copies from other times?
Yes.
Okay. Those I think are from the Lunch and Learn, the Torah study. If you want copies of of the Mishnah from earlier, let me know and I can email you the files. Okay. So the question then becomes, so we don't do work after midday, right? Because we would have done the sacrifice, and even though we don't have the sacrifice now, we're still at least getting ready for the Seder. Our mind should be directed towards that. But what about before noon? What about before midday? Are there any special rules? So that's the preface. So we understand that generally we stop work early for normal holidays and Shabbat. For Passover, we start work a little bit earlier, stop work a little bit earlier than that even. And that's where we're going to launch into our chapter 4. Good? Yes? No? Maybe? Good. Do I have a volunteer to read so I have someone to interrupt?
Why do we stop earlier than for Shabbat?
Well, the original idea for stopping at midday was because that was when you were supposed to have brought your sacrifice, the Korban Pesach. And as the Gemara says, if you're bringing the sacrifice and you've got the sacrifice performed, which will be eaten at the Seder that evening, are you really going to turn around, put the sacrifice down and go back to work? Right? Once the sacrifice has come, the mood of the holiday has begun. And therefore you shouldn't be working. So because there is that special sacrificial requirement for Pesach that's different than all other holidays, work finished earlier than for all other holidays. But now we're going to see that there's even a custom for some places to finish the work earlier, before Passover. So that's what we're going to. All right. Volunteers? Is there some discussion in the peanut gallery over here? Do I have to start calling on people? Come on, people. I need someone to interrupt.
There is. We have agreement to read.
See, you show up late. Everyone agrees you're going to be the designated reader.
Oh, okay.
All right. There you go. You get yourself situated. I'll handle the first one. I'll hand it off if you like later. All right. So Mishnah 1. In a place where it is the custom to do work on the eve of Pesach until midday, one may do work. Where it is the custom not to do work, one may not do work. Rather, a lot crammed into that simple sentence. The idea being that, let's see, we need a timeline here. Right, so this is midday, right? And then this is the actual Seder way over here in the evening, right? What it's saying here is that this time period is by custom. This time period, no. You don't get to work from midday on, but before midday, if your town, if it's the custom to stop work during the whole morning, then you don't work. And if it's the custom of the town to keep working, you should keep working. You can keep working. Right? So what kind of very interesting and novel thing have we introduced here that we haven't really talked in this class before? Community and minhag. Right? That there is such a thing as a minhag of the community, that even though both are fine, right? The halakha, work is okay, not work is okay. But the minhag of the community says, we do it this way. And you should follow the minhag of your community. Right? They're not asking you to do something wrong. They're not asking you to do something that's better than somewhere else. It's just, this is how we do it here. And if the minhag is, generally speaking, all things being equal, it's fine this way, fine that way, you should follow the minhag of your community. It's important to be part of the community. And just imagine for a moment what it would look like if everybody else in the town has stopped work all the way from the morning on, right? They wake up in the morning, they do shacharit for the morning, and they don't go to work. They get ready for Pesach. And you get out there and you start going through your field and you're harvesting, and no, what is this guy doing out here?
There's some room for lashon hara.
There's room for lashon hara, for people to start, You see that guy? He doesn't care about Pesach. He's out in the field. Does he think he's working better than? Is he better than us, or is he working harder? Does he think we're lazy? Because we're not working? Or is he trying to get ahead in business?
And what happens if someone work in the early? Sometimes if someone do something extra, they need to provide extra sacrifice to the temple because they earn more money. It's the same situation here. If someone start working early in the morning and against the custom, do they need to provide extra sacrifice because they had more money?
You haven't transgressed anything, and you don't owe any more because of it. But it's wrong to go against the community custom if the custom is fine. There are some customs that aren't so good, or some customs that need changing, or some customs that have room for adaptation. But if it's a general custom that doesn't have any reason not to follow it, then don't go against it. Be part of the community, follow the local custom. Yes? Okay. Part 2 is going to give us a little twist on this. Now, Judy, do you want to read?
Sure.
Okay.
Part 2. He who goes from a place where they work to a place where they do not work, or from a place where they do not work to a place where they do work, they place upon him the restrictions of the place from where he departed, and the restrictions of the place to where he has gone.
Okay. Everyone get that?
How do you do both?
How do you do both? You don't work. Right? If you come from a community where they don't work during the morning of the day before Passover, and you go to another town where they do work, where it's okay, you don't get to work in the other town, because in your hometown, you don't work. But if you come from the town where they do work, and you go to the other town for the morning of Passover, you also don't work, because they don't work there. So basically, if you come from or you go to a place where they don't work, don't work. You have to cover both bases. Now we can sort of understand, and they'll give a general rule in a second of why we don't work in a place where other people aren't working. But why shouldn't I work in the other town just because they don't work in my hometown?
Honor your teachers.
To honor your teachers. You're still part of that community. Now, if you move to the other town, right, if you are actually living and becoming part of a new community, then yes, you should honor the customs of the new community. But if you're just there, visiting or whatever, you have to follow the customs that you came from.
It's interesting because for Philot, you need to follow the custom where you live now.
Mm-hmm.
So why here they allow you to follow the custom from the place where you came?
Well, again, the idea is that you're visiting. Although, again, for tefillot, when you're visiting, you should follow the local custom, as long as it's nothing prohibited, of course. But what here they're talking about is that what are you losing, and what problem are you causing by not working?
that you will be uncomfortable in front of the community if everyone is working.
If
If you move into
Right.
a new place, okay,
right,
and everyone else work, and your original place didn't work, so now you don't supposed to work, you will feel very like an outsider of the community and very uncomfortable.
I suppose it's possible, but there are always some people in some communities that don't work. For whatever reason, their work is done, their work doesn't happen today. I'm a merchant, I've sold my stuff and my shop is empty. I have to wait for the new shipment or whatever it might be. I'm a baker, maybe not doing so much work right before Pesach or just making matzah, that's it. And you don't have to work in a place where there is no work, a place where it is accustomed to work if you have no work. Does that make sense? Right? If you don't have any work to do, you don't have to go find work to do. So if you're a visitor and you come from a place where they don't work, you don't have to invent work, and maybe you don't stand out quite so much by not working. But if you were working and everyone else wasn't, then that would really stand out. And so you get the stringencies from both sides.
Because what for me was strange is that usually when you move to a different place,
Mhm.
you should adapt to the customs today of the new place.
Right.
So that's example of the tefillah.
Right.
So here they say no, you don't need to adapt to the customs of your new place. That's what for me.
You don't need to adapt to the customs of the new place for working. You do have to adjust the customs of the new place for not working. Right.
So it's
Remember.
interesting the exception.
Right. So remember, you do adjust if you're coming from a place where everybody works and you go to a new place where they don't work for the day before, you stop working.
Mm.
Right? You do adjust. It's only the other direction that you don't have to adjust.
Why?
Again, it's you carry your community with you even when you're visiting somewhere else. You haven't become part of this new community and its teachings. And also you don't stand out just by, you're there for a few hours not doing any work. It's not such a big deal. You're not doing work in the face of others. You're just not working. And like I said, there's always times when people show up that aren't doing work. It doesn't cause the same problem as part 3 points out.
And a man must not act differently from local custom on account of the quarrels which would ensue.
Right, because it can cause problems. It can cause arguments. I know that to go back to the example of tefillah, where we see most commonly now customs that can cause friction. The question of, do you stand for the Kaddish or not stand for the Kaddish? I don't know how many different times I've seen people really get upset about the different customs, where people will stand for the Kaddish even if everyone else is sitting, because that's what they do. And other people who will stay seated. They will stay seated even if everyone else is standing, because that's what they do. And it causes friction, it causes arguments, it causes tension. And you normally adjust. And here they're basically saying you really do not want to go against the local custom. Again, the exception of not working when other people are working is you don't stand out the same way as you do sitting when everyone else is doing Kaddish. Because there's always a mix of people who are working and are working. If you look carefully at the first line of the Mishnah, in a place where it is accustomed to do work on the eve, one may do work. You are allowed to do work. It doesn't say you have to go find work. It's just you're allowed to do work. If your office is closed, it's not like you have to go break down the door and open it up and say, I'm going to work today. It's just you may. Whereas prohibited is a different level of you don't work. All right. As we know, we sort of move through. Let's see if we can head on to number 2, which is going to be one of our by the way Mishnahs. Right? This is, as long as we're talking about things that change from one direction or the other and going from one place to another, let me tell you about something else. Let me give you another topic that's similar to this. Not the same, but similar.
Similarly, he who transports sabbatical year produce from a place where it has ceased to exist in the field to a place where it has not ceased, or from a place where it has not ceased to a place where it has ceased, he is bound to remove it.
I'll go ahead and read Rabbi Yehuda, although he gets rejected.
Rabbi Yehuda says he can say to them, you can go out too and bring produce for yourself.
Okay, so the issue here is, goes back to the Shemitah laws, the sabbatical year laws. And you were allowed to eat things that were growing from the field naturally. And the idea was if it was available for the animals, then it's available for you. Once it stops being available for the animals, it stops being available for you. So you're not allowed to go out and harvest everything that's growing wild and keep it in your barn and just eat from it. That's not the way it's supposed to be done. You're supposed to take as it is grown and use it, and when it stops showing up, when the season is over, you stop eating it. But there's a problem, or not a problem, there's an issue, which is the growing season for different types of food is different in different parts of the country. So what happens if you live in one part of the country and the growing season is stopped, and so you've already gotten rid of that produce, you can't use it anymore, and then you travel to another part of the country and it's still growing wild there and available. Do you get to eat it or not? Or on the other hand, what happens if you are living someplace where it is growing wild and wonderful and available and you're chowing down all the time, and you travel somewhere else where it's no longer growing? Can you eat what you brought with you, even though it's not available locally? And the answer here from the sages is, don't. If you're going to a place where it stops growing, or you're coming for a place where it has stopped growing, you no longer get to eat it. It's done for you. And again, this is applying a stringency from both directions.
And the same idea also respect the minhag of the place.
Well, it's
kind of extension.
right. You're respecting the climate,
Yeah.
literally, of the place. Right? You are within the atmosphere, the climate of the local community.
The same extension idea.
Exactly. And Rabbi Yehuda argues against it, but he gets shouted down in the Gemara. So he's a minority opinion of one. But yeah, that respecting of the local community, and especially again that there was such a thing as keeping your local custom. But when you travel, you definitely want to be careful not to keep your local custom in conflict with other people. It's one thing to keep your local custom even when you travel over, as long as it doesn't cause any trouble, as long as it's not being in someone's face. So if you have a particular custom for your tefillah and you're in the hotel room, that's fine. But when you walk into the local shul, you check your home custom at the door. When you're in your hotel room by yourself, fine, keep your local custom for how you do your brachot. But when you go into the shul, you don't say, well, this is the way I do it at home. No, this is how they do it here. Make sense? Maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Mishnah 3, moving along. I apologize for the different font. Hopefully you can all adjust. It's trying to pull this up. For some reason, the United Synagogue still hasn't taken all of their email archives and put them into a full edited version of all of the Mishnah, because they've done the translation and commentary for the whole Mishnah, and it's still trapped in tiny little emails for almost all of the Masechtot, almost all the chapters. So I have to go through the emails and cut them out and paste them into Word to make these handouts. And sometimes the formatting doesn't always work easily, and I apologize. But really, it's the movement's fault. They should get an intern to just take care of all of that. It's only the entire Mishnah. Okay, ready?
Somebody's doctoral project.
Cut and paste. I'm not quite sure that counts as a meaningful contribution to the body of human knowledge, but well, maybe it's more meaningful than some. It's more meaningful than some. Okay, Mishnah 3.
Mishnah 3. In a place where it is the custom to sell small domesticated animals to non-Jews, such sale is permitted. But where the custom is not to sell, such sale is not permitted.
Okay, small cattle and big cattle are going to become our topic. So let's go ahead and see if we can clear that up. So small domesticated animal, or small cattle as it gets called in the usual translation, are things like goats and sheep. Right? They are small herd animals. And large herd animals like cows and oxen are generally prohibited for sale, at least in the ancient world, between a Jewish community and a non-Jewish community. And the idea was that you sell the larger animals that they are more likely to be worked on Shabbat. You don't normally work a sheep. I mean, it's not like you hook a sheep up to the plow and go through your field, right? You don't have the sheep pulling your cart and your wagon. So the concern for the small animals of work wasn't such a big issue, and so selling an animal to a non-Jew wouldn't lead to a possible use of the animal in a way that could violate. And yes, I can see by the quizzical looks around the room, once the non-Jew owns the animal, it's no longer a Jewish sheep or a cow, and so they're not prohibited from using it on Shabbat. But, says Jewish thinking, if I get in the habit of selling them animals that can be worked on Shabbat, then either they may come to rent an animal from me that they'll work on Shabbat, or when I go to sell it to them, it'll be Friday afternoon and they'll want me to show how much the animal can carry. And by the time I'm done, Shabbat will have begun, and then I will have violated Shabbat. So in general, the animals that get worked, we don't sell. And the animals that don't work, you're permitted to sell, but depending upon the local custom, right? If the local community says, yeah, sheep, goats, sell them to whoever you like, sell them to whoever you like. On the other hand, if the local custom is, we don't sell any of these kind of domesticated animals to non-Jews, because if you sell the little ones, you might come to sell the big ones, then even if you don't agree with the reasoning, it's the custom of the community and you follow it. Make sense? Okay?
It's more coherent, because if you say that you prevent to sell product because you don't want to start dealing Erev Shabbat,
right?
So it doesn't matter if it's small or big animal. Still, you will have the same problem. So
right.
It's more
well,
coherent that argument.
The logic of that interpretation of that commentary is that smaller animals, you don't prove their capability for work. Someone comes and wants to buy a goat. They look at the goat. They say it's a nice goat. They don't say, how much can that goat pull? Hook it up to the wagon and show me him pull a wagon. You don't demonstrate the animal as much. That was the idea.
Maybe the milk, how much milk can provide.
Do you milk goats in the evening or the afternoon? I don't know. I'm not a goat guy. But anyway, that was the general commentary. But the other explanation, of course, was that if you sell it, you'll also come to rent it. Right? If you get into the business of selling these animals, you'll also start leasing them and renting them. And if you lease a cow to your neighbor who's not Jewish for a week, chances are he might use it on Shabbat, and then you as a Jew are benefiting from your animal working. And that's not just such an accident. The rabbis are really, they are clever in knowing that we are clever. Right? So think for a moment, if you could rent your animals and whatever was happening to them on Shabbat didn't count as your problem, right? You didn't do any, you weren't using them. Wouldn't everybody just have a deal with the non-Jews in the town that come every Shabbat, they get the animal, right? Every Shabbat, they get to milk the cow and get the cheese. Come every Shabbat, they get to work the cow and the oxen, and I get paid. It'd be a way for me to make money off my lazy animal who's taking a day off. And everybody, again, it's not a matter of being greedy or such, it's a matter of being poor. You'd be stupid not to make money off your animal if you could for 1/7 of its life. And the rabbis realize that and say, no, you don't get to rent out your animal because it working for him on Shabbat is really working for you. And that's not allowed. And we're going to put in this precaution to make sure you don't even get close to that idea. Make sense? It's another fence. Okay. A fence for animals. Part 2.
Part 2. In no place, however, is it permitted to sell large animals, calves or foals, whether whole or maimed.
All right, so now why would calves or foals, the young versions of these animals, or whether they are in good shape or bad shape, why would that be something that needs to be spelled out? Anyone want to take a guess? Based on what we've already been saying about why we don't sell them in the first place.
The rental.
Right, if it has to do with work, calves don't work. A foal, a baby horse doesn't work, right? A calf is a baby cow, a foal is a baby horse, right? So they don't work, so why can't I sell that? Or if it's maimed, it's got a broken leg, what work is the broken ox going to do, right? There's no problem, but no. They kept the prohibition covering even animals that you wouldn't think are capable of working right now. those are still prohibited by this blanket no sale. Make sense? Okay, so again, they're very clever. They anticipate that someone might say, it's got a limp, so maybe I can sell it or rent it. No, doesn't work. Part 3 and 4.
Rabbi Judah permits in the case of a maimed one, and Ben Batera permits in the case of a horse.
All right, so for the horse, the Rabbi Ben Batera was really going off the idea that riding isn't the same type of work as hauling and plowing, and so that a horse would therefore be permitted. Others disagree, obviously, but that's where he's coming from. Just in case you're wondering, why would a horse be different? Make sense? A little bit? Okay. Now we get back to Passover. Remember that? We were in we were studying Passover? Right? Oh, yeah. Mishnah 4, we finally get back to Passover. But we're still doing customs.
In a place where it is the custom to eat roasted meat on the night of Pesach, they may eat it. Where it is the custom not to eat it, they may not eat it.
Okay. Who likes to have roast lamb on Passover? I saw some eyebrows. Wait a minute. Do we eat lamb on Passover?
That depends on whether you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi.
It depends on the custom of whether you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi, right? Most Ashkenazim do not eat lamb on Passover, right? It's considered to be too similar to the sacrifice that was done in the temple, and since we can't do the sacrifice, we have no temple. We don't want something that even looks like it on the table. And similarly, for even in the times of the Mishnah, there were some people who said anything that's roasted shouldn't be eaten at the Passover Seder. But there were other people who said, no problem, right? It's not prohibited by law. It's just a local custom, and our local custom is roasts are nice. Just like there is a Sephardim custom that roast lamb is quite tasty. And it's very fitting because it does remind you of the sacrifice, even if it isn't the sacrifice. And the answer here is, it's custom. If your local custom is eat roast, you can eat roast. And if your local custom is don't eat roast, don't eat roast. It's surprising sometimes how much variety there is within Jewish law. And I know we tend to think of it as being very, very cut and dry and strict, and everybody has to do the same, and da-da-da-da-da. And yeah, there's a lot of that, don't steal, don't murder, that kind of stuff. Pretty straightforward. We all have to follow the same set of rules. But for many of the aspects of our faith that are most distinctive, things that really set us apart, there's actually a lot of variety of how we do them, and a lot of permission for that variety. But there's also a need for community, because you can imagine if someone in the town, if someone came to town and everyone in the town didn't eat roast for Pesach, and you show up and you invite people over to your house and you have this giant steaming roast on the table, exactly, everyone's going to be like, who's this guy? What's he doing? So we do have to be respectful of where we are, as we also are respectful of the variety of positions and opinions. Natan, you look like you want to say something.
No, I was thinking of Kinyon.
You're just thinking about eating.
No, about Kinyon.
Mm-hmm.
So why that is the same problem?
Right.
So you need to respect also the...
Absolutely. And I'm trying to remember whether I've said it in this class or another one, but I'll repeat it because it's a really important one. This is a big discussion in Israel, because you have many Ashkenazim and Sephardim who live right next to each other. And many of them are even friends. It's nice. And obviously the Ashkenazim, many of them don't eat kitniot, the legume, during Passover. And for the Sephardim, no problem. A lovely bean stew during Passover is very nice. And the question comes up, can an Ashkenazic person eat in the Sephardic person's house? And the general answer that most rabbis give is an Ashkenazic person who keeps by not eating legumes can eat other things in the Sephardic person's house. They shouldn't eat legumes, straight out of the pan, but they can eat from a pan that has cooked legumes in it, even if they're not eating the legumes. They don't have to worry about it like they worry about chametz. You know, chametz, if someone says, oh, this is my bread pan, and here I've cooked something for you in it, I'm sorry, I can't eat out of that because it has chametz and that's contaminated what I'm eating. But if someone says, oh, this is the pan I normally cook my beans in, but for today I'm cooking my asparagus in it, everybody says, well, almost everybody says, if you're Ashkenazi, you can eat the asparagus, no problem. You don't have to worry about the essence of the legumes getting into the asparagus the same way you have to worry about chametz or something that was treif.
What happened in a mixed marriage of Ashkenazi?
Moving on. There are different ways that it's been reconciled. It depends on the community. If they are becoming part of a community where the Ashkenazic person is the majority or the most vocal. You know, for example, if there is a semi-observant Ashkenazic person who's marrying a very observant Sephardic person, then usually the Sephardic person's minhag will win. It's when you get two that are very observant of their own customs that you can sometimes get friction. And then usually it'll break down of what their local community says about whose customs you follow. And many of them say you follow the man's custom. Others will say it depends on which house you're living in, kind of thing. So there are customs about which custom you follow. So in the end, you really want to work that out. You know, before you get married, you want to know how many kids are we going to have, where are we going to live, and do we have legumes on Pesach? Right? If you can't answer those questions, you don't stand under the chuppah.
Not a good match.
Yeah, you don't get under the chuppah. You know, if you can answer the questions, you're fine. You know, you don't have to agree. You can still work it out, but as long as you've talked about it, then you're okay. Okay, still going on the custom theme. Oh yes, Nathaniel.
What was if like a wife is Sephardic and the husband is like Sephardic?
Right? Then they have to work it out of which customs they're going to follow. You know, as long as they talk about it and are nice about it, then it can always be worked out. Good question. Part 2.
Part 2. In a place where it is the practice to light a lamp at home on the night of Yom Kippur, they may light. Where it is the practice not to light, they may not light.
Okay. Now, I'm guessing everybody in the room, this seems kind of weird because we always light, right? We light candles for Yom Kippur, right? So who doesn't? It's a custom, right? It's a custom to light the candles. Now, if you accept the custom, then yes, we say the bracha over doing it. But for much of Jewish history, it was only a custom for some communities. And some communities, for Yom Kippur, wouldn't light a light. Oil lamps back then, candles we would be more familiar with now. Which brings us back to the question, well, why on Yom Kippur wouldn't you light? But on Shabbat, of course you do. Why do you light on Shabbat?
Because you're not permitted to light a fire later.
Exactly. And why might you want fire later? It's nighttime. Food? Well, you can't cook with it.
To see where you're going.
To see where you're going, specifically so that there will be good relations between husband and wife. Right? So when the Gemara talks about lighting for Shabbat, it talks about so that husband and wife don't trip on each other. Because there should be peace between husband and wife on Shabbat. And you can imagine that, you know, in a dark house, people are going to be falling over each other. And specifically on Shabbat, you want the husband and wife to be friendly with one another. If that euphemism is clear enough. Right?
Very friendly.
Very friendly, yes. As friendly as you can be. On Yom Kippur, you're not friendly in that way. Right? On Yom Kippur, that level of intimacy is prohibited. Therefore, some communities said it's prohibited. Therefore, who cares whether you're falling over each other? You don't need the light for Yom Kippur. And other communities said, no, you still need the light. And it's funny, there's actually some commentary that says that both communities argued about it specifically because of intimacy. One group said if you leave the light on, then they won't get up to anything. because you're not supposed to be doing this under broad light. Dim the lights is the modest way to be intimate. And so if you have the light on, it will keep them apart. And then other communities say, no, if you have the light on, then you're going to see each other and you're going to start being attracted to each other. So it's better to be dark, and then you don't see the other person, and then it's safe. So you can come up with good reasons for both custom. But ultimately, you follow the custom. That's the custom in your community. And like I said, for our community, the custom is to light. So I hope next Yom Kippur you do. But there is one, everybody does it way, part 3.
And they light lamps in synagogues, study houses, and dark alleys, and for the sake of invalids.
Right? So even for the groups that say don't light for your home on Yom Kippur evening, we do light before Yom Kippur for all of these places. Obviously, we need light in the synagogue because we're going to be there for services. We need light in the Beit HaMidrash so that we have light to be able to study with. And we're going to need light in dark alleys because it's safe to have light. And for people that are sick, you need to have light in order to be able to take care of them. So even if it's the custom not to light, for those parts you do. Make sense? Makes sense. Of course it makes sense. Judaism always makes sense. With enough time and practice, it always makes sense. Okay. In the place where it's the custom, Mishnah 5.
In a place where it is the custom to do work on the 9th of Av, one may do it. Where it is the custom not to do work, one may not do it.
Okay. The 9th of Av, also known as Tisha B'Av, right? Tisha B'Av, Tisha B'Av. It's the day of commemoration for the convergence of the greatest catastrophes of our people in one day. The destruction of the temples, the fall of Beitar, the expulsion from Spain, the expulsion from England, etc., etc., etc. It's a rather long list, and I do advise you to look it up. And that day is not like Shabbat, and it's certainly not like a Yom Tov or Chag, where you don't work, where you have a prohibition on work. But there are places that have a custom not to work, right? I mean, you're on Tisha B'Av, you're fasting, and you're not drinking. Are you really going to go and farm, right? Are you really going to go into the office today? There's also a question of auspiciousness, auspiciosity, of how auspicious the day is. Auspicious means, is there going to be good luck for you, right? Tisha B'Av is not a day when Jews have good luck. So what are you going to go do your big stock deal on Tisha B'Av? You know what's going to happen? You're gonna lose it all. What's that?
Naming the least.
Exactly. It's another list of another name on the list of catastrophes. Is I lost it all because I was doing this on Tisha B'Av. So there are people who say it's better just not to work on Tisha B'Av at all. And there are other people who say, look, it's not a Chag, it's not Shabbat, there's no prohibition on work, and I've got to work. So the custom in our community is we work. Both are fine. If your custom is to work, work. If your community's custom is not to work, don't work. Straightforward, right? I just love the fact that they acknowledge so much that there is this diversity within the Jewish world. And that it's okay that the town over the hill has a different custom than my town. That's fine. As long as you understand why the custom is there and what you're supposed to feel from it, then you're doing okay. And it's not the strict custom is better than the lenient custom, or the lenient custom is better than the strict custom. It's just, what's your custom? Okay, onward.
In all places, students of sages desist from work on that day.
Right, if you are if you are a Talmid Chacham, if you are a student of the sages, that's a sort of an official category, or at least it sounds like one right now, then you don't work. However,
Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, a man should always make himself a student of sages.
So he puts a little bit higher, right? So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, whether you're officially a Talmid Chacham or not, whether you've really reached that rank of learning and scholarship to be considered that level, you should emulate that way. You should try to be living that way. And therefore, maybe you shouldn't work. And what he's saying is here that it's within even a place where it is accustomed to work, some people can strive to reach a spiritual level where they don't work. And in that particular case, it would be good not to work, at least if you follow the opinion of Rabban Shimon Gamliel. But not everyone does, so it's okay. Good? Maybe? Okay. But
the sages say in Judea they used to work on the eve of Pesach until midday, while in Galilee they did not work at all.
okay, remember how we started talking way back at the beginning about when do you work and when do you not work? Well, now we're going to push it back even further, right? What does it say here? Right? What was it?
We've gone back to the Passover. When do you
But
work?
when?
In Judea, you don't work. In
Right.
The morning.
No, the opposite.
Right? On Judea,
They work
You work in the
until
morning.
midday. Until midday.
right? And in Galilee,
But in the Galilee, they don't.
right? In Galilee, they don't at all. And when we push it back even further to the night, that is to say, so here we have the custom being that in Judea, you work until noon, and in the Galil, you don't work during this time period at all. But what about the nighttime before? Because remember, a day begins with Tzeit Kochavim when the stars come out, and it begins the night before. So it's already the day before Passover, the night before Passover. So what do we do about this time? Do we work or not work? Depending, and that's what part 3 is going to tell us.
How will this relate to the Tisha B'Av?
It isn't.
But this is
Well,
the Mishnah.
It's a bookend. So we began with Passover work. We went through Shemitah and Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur lights and all of that, and now Tisha B'Av, and now we're coming back to Passover.
What did you put in Mishnah 6? Okay.
Because Mishnah 6 is a different topic.
In the middle of the Mishnah 5, they switch.
You and Yehuda Hanassi need to talk.
We need to talk about very serious.
Yes. But let's get part 3 down before we go on. Yeah.
Part 3, with regard to the night, Beit Shammai forbid work, but Beit Hillel permit it until sunrise.
Right. So for them, if you're in this time period, right, the nighttime period, if you're in a place where they don't work during sunrise to midday, well, no. If you are from the house of Shammai, right, then you don't. And if you're from Hillel, you do. Right? So Shammai says no for the nighttime, and Hillel says yes until sunrise. If you want to do some work during the night, maybe you're a grad student, no problem. But even Hillel would say if you're in a place like the Galil where they don't work on the day of Passover, then you would stop once sunrise came up. And Shammai basically says from when you do the B'dikat Chametz, the search for the Chametz the night before, that's the end of your work. You're not doing any work until after Passover, the day of Passover is done.
I like Shammai.
You like Shammai. More days off.
Yeah.
But remember, not working was sometimes a hardship. So it's not always a blessing, depending upon who you are. Okay.
Yeah, not working means not cooking.
Or more importantly, not eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what happens to work that's already moving? Right? So this is a question that also comes up on the halacha for Shabbat. Let's say, for example, I have an olive press. Anyone here ever run an olive press? I know we all do. But one of the most common forms of olive press, you're going to get to see my wonderful artistry. There. That's my olive press. So what do? You have, this is a hinge. You have a big container stone container, and you throw all the olives in. And you put a big weight on top. And the weight keeps pushing slowly, and it can take days to crush all of the olives, and all of the olive oil comes out of the bottom. So I put all the olives in on the day before Passover, and I put the weight on top of it then, and I let it go. Well, does this count as working on the day of Passover? I'm not starting it, but it's happening. And it's happening because I started it, and I kind of sort of knew that it would keep working to the day before Passover. So is that okay? Is that not okay? Got the idea?
But do you have any input in the process?
I started it.
No, but after that, go by itself.
In this particular case, they're talking about, yes, you have an input for the finishing. Can you come and gather the oil, or can you take the flax that was soaking out of the mixture? You know, so you're finishing the work.
So it's working.
There is
Because
some work, but it's a finishing. It's not a starting. Kind of, sort of, maybe. Yes.
How about if you're like you put a turkey in the oven like last night
Mm-hmm.
and you're putting it in and it's not ready by tomorrow?
And that's a big question for Shabbat, right? What happens if you want to cook something for Shabbat and you start cooking it before Shabbat begins, but it's not 100% done before Shabbat starts? When Shabbat starts, are you allowed, after Shabbat starts, are you allowed to take the turkey out? And I love the choice of turkey. Are you allowed to take it out? And the answer for Shabbat, at least, and we're going to get an answer for Pesach here, because remember, we're not talking about on Passover. We're talking about the day before. But on Shabbat, at least, if the food was cooked enough to be edible before Shabbat began, then you can eat it even if it continues to cook on Shabbat. Does that make sense? Right? If the food wasn't done yet, like let's say you've got bread and you just put it in the oven and you go light candles. Nah, that doesn't count. Or if you've got a roast, right? You put a brand new pink turkey in the oven. Is turkey pink when it's raw? Right, you put a raw turkey in the oven and then you go light candles? No, you don't get to eat the turkey. But if the turkey's already done, but you like your meat a little better cooked, you like it to keep going, you want to get that golden brown on the top, whatever it is, but you could eat it right now, it just wouldn't be perfect, then it's okay to let it continue to cook as long as you're not adjusting the stove or fiddling with anything else. You just let it finish doing what it's doing, take it out and eat it later. The most famous example of this, of course, is cholent, right? Cholent is a very, very popular Shabbat dish. You begin it before Shabbat, and it better be edible before Shabbat begins, but it gets better as Shabbat continues, as it sits there bubbling and cooking all the way through Shabbat, right? But it has to be edible before Shabbat begins. You can't put it on 5 minutes before candlelighting. It has to be edible. You have to be able to eat it before Shabbat begins. But let's hold on. We got to, Nathaniel, just hold on a second. I want to get what actually the rabbis say about this issue of work before Passover begins. Remember, we're talking about this special time when normally work would be okay, but they're putting some special restrictions on it. Yes.
Rabbi Meir says, any work which he began before the 14th, he may finish it on the 14th, but he may not begin new work on the 14th, even if he can finish it on the same day.
Right? So Rabbi Meir is basically taking the position of if you began your olive pressing before the day before Passover, then on the 14th, which is this day, right before Passover, you can finish it up. Right? Even though that would be kind of weird, you can go ahead and finish it up. Make sense? Maybe? Okay. But you can't start new work at all. Right? New work doesn't work. New work doesn't work. English, it's a great language.
The sages say 3 craftsmen may work on the eve of Pesach until midday, and these are they: tailors, hairdressers, and laundrymen. Right,
and they mean that only these 3 are permitted to do this kind of work up to the midday. That they have a special dispensation. And the idea was that all three of these were special for the celebration of Passover and for making everything work, right? So that you'd have the right clothes for the Chag, you would be prepared for the Chag physically, and in particular, we're talking about, what's the name of the festival? What are the fancy words for the pilgrimage festivals? Shalosh Regalim, right? The three leggers, right? The three things you got to walk for. You're going to want to have a shoemaker around when everybody is walking to Jerusalem and everybody's walking home, because I can tell you there are going to be a lot of broken shoes. Out of thousands of people, someone's shoes are going to break and wear out, and they're not going to be able to get there, or they won't be able to get home if their shoes are broken. So you may not think of shoemakers as being important, but they are important. Oh, I was skipping ahead.
That's why
Yeah.
Rabbi
Sorry. I was skipping ahead. Yes, that was part A. See, it's get out of whack. So part A, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says shoemakers too, because of the issue of the Shalosh Regalim. And the laundrymen, by the way, are very important, because laundry wasn't something that was done casually in the ancient world. I imagine most of us have days when we just do our laundry, and we probably do it every week. And most of our clothes we wear are freshly laundered. We probably don't wear too many clothes multiple days in a row. I'm guessing. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. Right? Most of us change our clothes and wash our clothes before we wear them again. Maybe, some sweaters or jackets. We don't do that. We do the whole dry cleaning thing for suits. But our day-to-day sort of casual-ish type clothes, our work clothes, we wash a lot more than it used to be. It used to be that washing your clothes was kind of special, and getting them laundered and freshly pressed and all of that was a big deal. And that was what you would do for a special holiday. It's also one of the things you didn't do when you were in mourning during the grief period. You wouldn't wear new, freshly washed and ready clothes. Yes, Nathaniel?
How about for the roast? Always pretend like,
You're still thinking about the food.
and then like if there was like the hot day of the summer and it was Shabbat,
Mm-hmm.
so I have two things. Could the roast just go outside and lay in the sun?
You can't cook on Shabbat by other means than regular cooking, like fire type cooking, because that's still too close to cooking. Although it is technically a rabbinic limit, not a Torah limit, it's still something we don't do. So no solar ovens for Shabbat. But if you want to leave your turkey outside after it's been cooked to stay warm, that's okay.
And can you just put it in the microwave?
They didn't have microwaves, and microwaves are a little bit more complicated than where we are right now. Okay.
Following up his question,
The-
why one of the professionals is not the cookers? Because they're supposed to prepare the meat for a Pesach. They need to work maybe during the whole morning, maybe on restaurant or something. One the cookers.
The bakers, the chefs, right?
Yes.
Right. Because most people were cooked for themselves. When you're cooking the Passover sacrifice, you didn't take it to a chef to do. When you cook for Shabbat, usually people cook for themselves or for their neighbor. You didn't have restaurants in the ancient world. You didn't have takeout in the ancient world. Food was cooked by the person. And again, that just goes back to the economy back then. How do you have enough food that you can prepare the food for someone else and then sell it if you don't know who's going to buy it and all of that? It just generally, most people cook for themselves. So now it gets a little more complicated in today's world. But back then, it wasn't really a big worry. All right, let's, 8 o'clock. So we only have 2 left. But they are, because I know we're not going to get through Mishnah 8. Oh no, it's Mishnah 8 and 9. Now we got 3 more to go.
7.
What?
Wait a minute.
Does yours finish at 7? There's 7, 8, 9.
We didn't do 7 yet.
We haven't done 7 yet. There's 7, 8, and 9 left. I think we're going to have to save them. because 7 kind of fits in with what we've just done, but it's a little complicated for animals. And then 8 and 9 are completely different, and we're going to have to save them because they have a lot of case by case by case.
Mine
Yes,
has 10.
yours goes up to 10. Is it 7, 8, 9, 10 in this one? Look at that.
Up to 5.
Oh no. You're in the next.
Skip ahead.
You're in the next chapter. Yeah, chapter 4 only goes up to 9. Chapter 5 goes up to 10. Okay, don't get ahead of yourself. All right, so we'll save it. Class is on for next week, so if you're around, please join us. And I promise we'll finish chapter 4 and start chapter 5. Okay? Okay, we want to make sure we can actually finish this before Passover. Just in case any of you are worried about, traveling from one part to another part. And as I said before, a lot of the material